It's 2 in the afternoon on Friday, August 29th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. The stories we are following at this hour. Prime Minister Chung Hong-won takes to the airwaves to call for an end to the political paralysis that has kept bills intended to revitalize the economy on hold. North Korea will not send a cheerleading squad to South Korea for the upcoming Asian Games and blames Seoul for reversing its decision. And the number of people infected with Ebola rises, but there may be hope as an experimental vaccine developed by the U.S. and Britain will soon be tested on humans. And let's begin with Prime Minister Chung Hong-won's speech this morning. He has urged lawmakers to stop bickering and get going on passing a slew of pending bills, including the so-called ferry bill, which would lay out the details of an investigation into April's ferry disaster. Ji Myung-gil starts us off.
Prime Minister Chung Hong-won says there's no more time to waste in passing long-pending legislation aimed at stimulating the economy.
At least 30 economic stimulus-related bills are related to improving the livelihoods of the people. Job creation and the economic recovery are lagging. Now is the time to get them passed.
Chung's remarks coincide with government efforts to reboot the economy. In recent weeks, the Finance Ministry has introduced a set of stimulus measures along with proposals for tax code revisions to induce money flows from businesses to households in the form of investment, salary hikes, and dividend payouts. The Prime Minister also urged lawmakers to pass the one piece of legislation that is keeping all the others held up, the one that would set up a probe into April's ferry tragedy. The rival parties remain deadlocked over the special Seoul ferry bill, with the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy taking to the streets in protest and boycotting all parliamentary proceedings. The ruling Saenuri Party is digging in its heels and demanding that the opposition get back to work. The months-long partisan divide has indefinitely postponed annual parliamentary audits and pushed thousands of other bills awaiting review into the shadows. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
The housing market in Seoul is showing signs of picking up after some government regulations were eased earlier this month. Although it's traditionally an off month for home buying, the Seoul Housing Information Plaza says the number of housing transactions in the Korean capital is expected to surpass 6,200 in August, which would make it the highest since 2009. This comes after the government's new economic team led by Finance Minister Changwon rolled out expansionary policies, chief among them being eased limits on the amount of money people can borrow from banks when purchasing a home. So we're seeing positive signs from the real estate market, but what about other sectors? Industry output for July barely rose at all, while business sentiment among manufacturers dropped for the fourth straight month. Song Ji-sun reports.
The country's industrial output kept expanding in July, but the lackluster gain was yet another indicator that the much-anticipated recovery in domestic demand is not kicking in. Statistics Korea said Friday that production for all industries picked up by 0.2% last month, with the manufacturing sector expanding by more than 1% from June, helped by robust activities in the automobile and oil refinery industries. The pace of gains for all industries slowed considerably from 2.2% in June. Production in the service sector inched down 0.4% from a month earlier, with activities among wholesalers and retailers and the financial industry all contracting by more than 1%. A separate indicator confirmed that Korean manufacturers are not expecting a full economic recovery anytime soon. The Bank of Korea announced Friday that the business sentiment index for manufacturers for August stood at 72, the lowest figure in more than a year and the fourth consecutive monthly drop following April's deadly ferry disaster. Bank officials say businessmen remain worried about weak domestic demand and abundant uncertainties in and out of the country. A rating below 100 means pessimists outnumber optimists. Consumers, however, expect rosier days ahead, with consumer sentiment at 107, up 2 points from the previous month. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
North Korea says it will not send a cheerleading squad to the Incheon Asian Games set to kick off in South Korea in a couple of weeks. Pyongyang blames Seoul for making the regime flip its earlier decision. Yoo has the details.
Laying the blame at Seoul's feet for its concerns over the cheering team, the vice chairman of North Korea's National Olympic Committee officially announced on Thursday that Pyongyang was taking back its decision to send a cheerleading squad to the upcoming Asian Games.
The South expressed concern over our sending of the cheerleading squad, and they raised concerns, so we decided not to send them for the 17th Asian Games.
He added the committee's decision was conveyed to South Korea when the two sides met last week for working-level talks to discuss this very issue. This unexpected development comes after weeks of tense negotiations over Pyongyang's decision to send a 350-member cheerleading squad, which would have been more than twice the size of North Korea's contingent of athletes. While Pyongyang kept saying the move was to promote goodwill, the two Koreas have been at odds over who would have paid for the group during their stay in South Korea. Despite the move, North Korea says its athletes will participate in the Games. The latest turn of events goes against expectations of a more conciliatory attitude from North Korea, following the end of the joint military drills between South Korea and the United States this week.
In the short term, it's inevitable inter-Korean ties will get worse. But if the Koreas fail to improve relations, they will feel pressure from inside and outside of the country. So in the long run, there's a high chance the two will begin dialogue.
The South Korean government did not comment directly on North Korea's announcement, only confirming that it was informed. Officials added that they will continue to take all steps necessary to make sure the North Korean team can participate in the Asian Games, which kick off on September 19th in Incheon. Yoo-rian, Arirang News.
And there's one other sports event the North Korean regime is paying extra attention to, a pro wrestling competition taking place this weekend in Pyongyang. Experts say the communist regime is trying to enhance relations with Washington and Tokyo through sports diplomacy. Our Kim Hyun-bin has more.
Several athletes arrive at Pyongyang Airport. They're all pro wrestlers here to take part in an international wrestling competition. There are some familiar faces, such as Bob Sapp and Jerome Lee Banner, who are well known in the wrestling world. But all eyes are on Japan's wrestler-turned-politician, Antonio Inoki.
I believe this event will be successful. I hope it serves as a stepping stone for international peace.
The head of North Korea's International Olympic Committee, Changwon, greeted the athletes upon their arrival. North Korean state media has been extensively promoting the competition, airing previews and detailed introductions. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is known to take advantage of sports diplomacy to promote his country. But some experts say this could be a means to enhance relations with Japan. As Inoki had a meeting with the secretary of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea, Kang Sok-ju, experts believe he might also be acting as a go-between for the Japanese government. The pro wrestling event comes as two nations look to improve bilateral ties, especially by dealing with the issue of Japanese nationals kidnapped by North Korean agents in the 1970s and 80s. Seoul-based Yonhap News reported, quoting diplomatic sources in Tokyo, that the two countries face difficulties in making progress in their government-level talks. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
In the year 2012 for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. The deadly Ebola virus has already infected more than 3,000 people in West Africa, and the WHO warned that the number could reach 20,000 if proper action is not taken. But there is hope, as an experimental drug proven to be effective on monkeys will soon be tested on humans. Our Kwon So-ah has more.
The WHO warned on Thursday that the number of Ebola cases could rise to 20,000 as the infection is spreading at an uncontrollable speed. The virus has already killed more than 1,500 people, and there are at least 3,000 reported cases as of now. But the health agency believes the actual number could be up to 4 times higher than that. A high-level official at the WHO says the agency has been caught off guard by the scale of this outbreak.
That's not saying we expect 20,000 cases. That is not saying we would accept, more importantly, 20,000 cases. I think that's completely unacceptable.
The WHO is calling for a full-scale humanitarian response to the crisis, and that's going to require a lot of money.
Going forward, this is going to cost, we estimate, $489 million over the next 6 months. It is a big operation. We're talking well over 12,000 people operating over multiple geographies in very, very difficult and high-risk circumstances. It's expensive.
There's some hope on the horizon, though. An experimental Ebola vaccine developed by US and British-based health institutes will soon be tested on humans. Tests have already proven successful on monkeys, and the initial human trial will be conducted on around 20 healthy adults at a National Health Institute of Health clinic in Maryland next week. If everything goes well, the second phase is expected to take place in Africa after strict scientific and ethical standards are met. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Back here in the nation, the remains of 18 Koreans who passed away in the Soviet Union decades ago have finally come home. Forced into hard labor during Japan's colonization of the Korean peninsula, they were never able to leave Sakhalin, an island in Russia's Far East. Shin Se-min has this story.
Some 70 years after they were forcibly sent to the Soviet Union by Japan, 18 Koreans have finally come home. The ashes of the 18 were handed over by Russia to Korea on Thursday. They're just a fraction of the 30,000 Koreans who were forcefully drafted to Sakhalin in the late 1930s by Japan during its colonization of the Korean peninsula. Not even liberation in 1945 meant freedom for the victims. Many were not able to return to Korea for a number of reasons.
Being at the scene showed me how many hardships Koreans went through back then. It's tragic that they weren't able to come home before they died.
My father passed away at the age of 86, and now I am 86. Bringing him back at this age makes it all the more special.
Forced into harsh labor conditions at construction sites and coal mines during the war, many of the Korean victims were the target of mass slaughters towards the end of it. The return of these 18 Korean nationals is the second such event following the return of one victim last year and comes as a result of consultations between the Korean and Russian governments.
Before bringing the remains to Korea, the families of the deceased were able to witness the excavation of the remains and were even able to conduct funerals. It's the first time they've been allowed to do both.
The ashes of the now 19 Korean victims now lie at National Manghang Cemetery in Chungcheongnam-do Province, which serves as a resting place for Koreans who resided and passed away in foreign lands. The nation's foreign ministry and the Commission of Forced Mobilization under Japanese colonialism are working to bring the remains of the thousands of other Korean victims home in the near future. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Starting in September, Seoul will have 10 electric-powered taxis offering their services around the capital. The city government says it will be a trial program running through April next year. And instead of the common orange paint jobs, they will be painted sky blue, which is supposed to denote that it's better for the environment. The fare for the electric taxis will be the same as regular ones, starting at 3,000 won or less than $3. The cost for charging the cars will be paid by the city and the Korea Environment Corporation. Now, the fall is fast approaching, and so is the wedding season here in Korea. Up until now, the Korean wedding culture tend to be a very expensive business, but an increasing number of soon-to-be-weds are deciding to keep things simple, going for practicality and uniqueness. Connie Kim has this next report.
skipping the conventional photo shoot and dropping the bride and groom gift exchange process is what these newlyweds did when preparing for their wedding back in May. They rented a small house in the city for their wedding and only invited close friends and family.
We didn't want to spend a lot on a typical wedding ceremony like others, so we decided to skip the expensive gift exchanges between families. Even our wedding rings were only $500.
All the money the couple saved will go to a second honeymoon. More pairs are choosing to cut down the frills, and it's no wonder because saying "I do" in Korea can be an extravagant affair. Check out the statistics for yourself. With an average $24,000 that a couple spends on preparing for marriage, about 1/5 is spent on hunsu, a wedding tradition. Hunsu consists of furniture and other household items a bride buys to fill her new home that has been purchased by the groom, and it's symbolic of old patriarchal traditions. With Korea's long-standing patriarchal society slowly fading and soon-to-be married couples looking for a special experience, one-of-a-kind wedding ceremonies are on the rise. And industry insiders back this up, saying an increasing number of couples these days are going against wedding norms.
In Korea, there's an increasing number of people who have lived abroad, and naturally they have become receptive to the different wedding cultures. I think it has contributed to the recent growing number of couples holding unique weddings.
Pang says requests for chapel weddings and house weddings have become more popular to tie the knot while making ends meet. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The summer blockbuster season is wrapping up, and now comes the festival and awards season. This week, the Venice International Film Festival will kick off. That's where Korean films have done well over the years, and this year, a trio of Korean movies are screening. For more, we are joined by our film critic, Pierce Conran. Good afternoon, Pierce.
Good afternoon to you.
So Venice Film Festival, of course, it's one of the oldest and biggest, and it's a huge honor to have your film screened there.
Absolutely. Last year, in fact, Venice celebrated its 70th anniversary, so it is the longest running film festival. And along with Cannes and Berlin, it's kind of part of this trifecta of like the big prestigious festivals in Europe and as well as the world. And this is kind of an interesting time in the festival calendar because this is when things really kick off. After the kind of summer blockbuster season, we start looking at kind of more art house films, and people start thinking about the Oscars and the this whole awards race. So we have this week what we had was Venice kicked off on Wednesday, and then next week we have Toronto, which is really where a lot of these kind of Oscar films come in. There's also another film festival called Telluride, which starts in a few days as well. Now, so it kicked off on Wednesday, Venice did, and with the film Birdman, which is the new film by Alejandro González Iñárritu, who made Amores Perros and Babel in the past. And this one has been getting rave reviews. People are always already talking about it for Oscar glory.
So what about Korean films? Have many broken out after being screened in Venice?
Absolutely. Now, it's an old festival, and I won't say that there have been Korean films there for the whole 70 years of it, because for many decades, Korean cinema was not very well known. But actually, the first major award ever won by a Korean film was in Venice, and that was the famous actress Kang Soo-yeon, who won the Best Actress prize in 1987 for Im Kwon-taek's film The Surrogate Woman, which is called Shibaji in Korean.
Right.
And so that was a big success then. We've had other big prizes like Moon So-ri, who won the Marcello Mastroianni Rising Star Award in 2002 for Lee Chang-dong's Oasis. And of course, you can forget Kim Ki-duk, who won the Best Director prize, which is called The Silver Line in 2004 for 3 Iron or Binjip. And then, of course, in 2012, he won the biggest prize of all, the Golden Line. That's to date the only time a Korean film has won one of the top awards at one of these festivals.
So those are quite some achievements, given that the Korean cinema industry has short history.
Certainly.
But what about this year? You said there's going to be a trio of movies that are going to be screened in Venice.
That's right. So we have 3 new films this year, and these are all kind of big festival names, and they've all been to Venice before. And in fact, the awards I've already mentioned, they're all tied to these filmmakers. So we have Im Kwon-taek, of course, the big Korean filmmaker.
Legendary
He's made exactly
director.
Legendary. People call him the godfather of Korean cinema. He's presenting his 102nd work, which is called Revivre, and that is, so of course, he was the first person to win an award with Kang Soo-young's Best Actress win in '87, so he's back. And Hong Sang-soo is coming in with his 16th film, Hill of Freedom, and that stars Moon So-ri, who won the award in 2002. And then, of course, Kim Ki-duk is back for the 3rd year on the trot with his film One on One.
So it's kind of like revisiting the past, per se, but tell us more about the films then in detail.
It certainly is revisiting the past. I mean, these are all great filmmakers, have made wonderful films, and have this kind of incalculable contribution to Korean cinema. But it would have been nice to see a little bit of fresh blood in there. So these are, strong filmmakers, but a little bit of a risk would have been more interesting. So when we talk about Toronto, maybe in the future, there are some more interesting things there. But so what we have, Im Kwon-taek's Revivre, that is they went for a French name, which actually means to live again. And the Korean title, which is Hwajang, is interesting because it's a homonym. It means both makeup and cremation. This film stars An Song-ki, another big legend of Korean cinema. They've worked many times before. And he stars as a middle-aged man who is torn between his younger mistress and his dying wife. And so this seems like a much more kind of intimate and personal film for Im Kwon-taek, who is known for his kind of more historical epics and kind of his social commentaries. So it's interesting to see his kind of style change, even now that he's making 102 films, he's still kind of changing. Hill of Freedom, which stars Moon So-ri, also stars Kaseryu, who's a big Japanese star. Apparently a lot of the film is in English. It's Hong Sang-soo's shortest film to date, at only 67 minutes.
Wow, it's just barely over an hour.
Yeah, exactly. It's barely a feature film. But he's made short films before, kind of around the 79, 80-minute mark, so this is it is shorter. But he's done that before. Again, it's a typical Hong Sang-soo film. Japanese character comes to Korea to connect with his old flame, and he meets people along the way, lots of discussions. And then we have Kim Ki-duk's One on One. That's his 20th film. It was actually originally submitted to Cannes, didn't make the cut, but it was screened theatrically in Korea back in May. Now the cut here I've heard is a little different. They went for an international version. And so that was also the opening film of the Venice Days, which is the sidebar of the Venice Film Festival.
So out of the 3, I feel like I'll probably go for the first one. I think I probably personally am a fan of An Sung-ki, and that kind of sounds like a role that he would normally not take.
Exactly. This is a difference from, he's mentioned already in interviews that he felt uncomfortable playing the role because it's so different from the kind of person he is. Of course, An Sung-ki has an impeccable reputation. And yes, he's a wonderful actor. I'm very excited to see that film.
So those 3 are the big 3 movies that we need to be on the lookout for.
Well, they're the big 3 that are playing at Venice. But there are actually quite a few interesting Korean films on the way. Now, perhaps next week we might have a chance to look at the films of Toronto, because there's a special lineup there this year, a showcase called the City to City Seoul Focus. There are 8 contemporary Korean films there. Ironically, only 1 or 2 of them are actually set in Seoul. They're mostly in Busan and other places. But there are some really terrific films there, and not just from big names, some younger people as well.
Fresh new faces.
Yeah, absolutely. So they have 14 films in total, actually, 14 Korean films in total. And next week, Busan will reveal its lineup for the upcoming 19th edition in October. So there'll be plenty more Korean films to be on the lookout for. But on a side note, with this kind of start of the award season, Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer actually became the first film to enter the Oscar race, which is really quite remarkable.
Yes.
The TWC Radius, who are distributing the film in America, submitted screeners for the Academy voters. So it's the first film in the race. So we'll see how it does.
All right, all right. I'm looking forward to next week. We'll perhaps talk about Toronto Festival.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you very much, Pierce, for your report today.
Good afternoon, I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. A nice sunny day is upon us in Seoul. However, rain will move in as we proceed into the afternoon and evening. But we can still expect the daytime highs to be right around 30 degrees. And as you can see, we have partial cloud covers hovering over the nation, and by looks of things, heavier clouds are moving in a northeasterly direction towards the Korea's peninsula, especially towards the southern regions. And upon 260 millimeters are forecast to fall on Jeju Island and the surrounding areas today, while between 5 to 40 is expected in the central region. And now going over to our temperature readings. Seoul will top out this afternoon at 29 degrees. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will hit over 26 and 25 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island will get up to 24. Dokdo hits 22, while Mount Kumgang tops out at 25. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and have a great day.
Well, that's all we have for you now. Thank you for watching. I'll be back with more updates at 4 p.m. Korea time.